Hello there, don't mind me, I'm reading about Genshin's lore. Just kidding, it's about both the patience and the ability to read. Point is, a vast amount of Genshin's lore is scattered throughout various books and schizophrenic notes, which have been read by a grand total of 2 people, the unpaid intern who wrote them and the one GigaChat wiki author who made them accessible to the public. And thinking about it, it can neither be confirmed nor refuted that they are the same person, so they might as well just be one. Today, I'll be taking you on a wild and wacky journey through Mondstadt's history, yes, that's how you pronounce it, consisting of events such as incidents equivalent to those that took place on September 11th, 2000, unpaid labor, or who could forget the sudden onset of a new Pleistocene. Now, immediately, unless you're familiar with the Genshin's lore, in which case, hi, you will ask yourself questions such as, what the fuck is the new world? If there's a new world, what about the old world? Or even, that YouTube short looks very interesting, should I go watch that instead? Now, 2 of these questions I could answer today, however I think they're beyond the scope of this video, so for now pretend that everything you don't understand and I don't explain is white noise unimportant to the things discussed. When you think of Mondstadt, what will come to mind will vastly differ based on factors such as your tolerance for a story a literal 5-year-old could have written, among others. That is to say, there isn't a whole lot to say about Mondstadt's Archon quest, so instead we'll have to look sometime else, back eons before the establishment of any recognizable governing structures or cultures present in Mondstadt today. Back then, the region that would come to be called Mondstadt had a drastically different climate than it does today. Instead of the lush meadows, it was a barren wasteland filled with howling blizzards, scarcely to be called habitable. To clarify, I'm talking about the entirety of Mondstadt. All of it was a white and desolate hellscape, similar in both temperature and hospitality to Quebec, the only part of North America that could be accurately compared to pre-bubonic plague Europe. Emerging from this hostile landscape was a people that would later name themselves the Salvindagnier. Considering the conditions in which they had to have lived, I'm not entirely sure whether they actually originated from Mondstadt or just passed through it, in which case their migratory path would suggest they came from either Fontaine or the area north of Mondstadt, which is probably Snezhnaya. They, presumably on the verge of dying from 20 different things, came upon a back then fertile mountain, calling it Vindagnier. Now, I'm really not sure what was named after what, so whether the Salvindagnier named themselves after the already established mountain or named the mountain after themselves, but quite frankly, it really doesn't fucking matter. Anyways, their civilization prospered, a massive castle was built atop the mountain, and thanks to a tree connected to Irminsul growing in the area, its people received many blessings. Under this tree was born a princess who later in life would have a vision, an immense dragon poisoning and corrupting their thriving kingdom. However, that wouldn't be of any consequence for centuries to come. What would though was Celestia, which began ominously looming over the mountain. It just sat there for a while until one day it nuked their asses, dropping a divine nail onto the inhabited area. Divine nails, to keep it short, are obviously parts of Celestia employed to drastically change environments by way of influencing ley lines. Anyways, the Skyfrost nail shrouded the entire mountain in a freezing blizzard, and as if that wasn't enough, the Irminsul offshoot just fucking died. Now, there's 3 characters that I will introduce, all of them important in that, spoiler, they all fucking die or vanish. First of all, Liyue, I don't know how the fuck to pronounce that. He was a hero from a distant land, and at the time of the catastrophe, lived with the Salvindagnier for unknown reasons. So, when calamity befell the people, he was gifted the snow-tombed Star Silver by the princess and set out to find a way to save the nation. He didn't, coming back later to find everyone dead, so he left his sword in a vault and walked into the sunset, very dramatically. The last part is not confirmed. He would later go on to establish the Liyue clan, a supposedly influential clan in Mondstadt to this day. However, there is not a single known member of that clan in-game. It is theorized that Varka is a member of this mysterious clan. However, considering the next Mondstadt expansion is expected to be released at around the same time the new Chinese Empire plans to expand into Germany, I don't think whether Varka is an Liyue or not is going to be of any importance for the next little while. Moving on, there was a man named Baruch I don't fucking know, who was the last priest regent of the Salvindagnir and also the princess's father. He was very influential, probably as all that's known about him only relates to his actions during the catastrophe, which involved him heroically embarking on an epic journey up the mountain in search of an explanation from the powers that be. However, as all northerners will know, leaving your house during a blizzard without a chemically powered pocket warmer is a risky endeavor, and so sadly, Baruch fell victim to his own foolishness, unpreparedly ascending the mountain only to die due to a lack of warm hands, and probably hands at all for that matter. And lastly, before I talk about the last character, who along with the priest and the princess is the last one relating to their respective boxes found in the area, I want to talk about the princess for a bit more, as before he left to try to climb the mountain, her father, the priest, told her to paint a fresco depicting their futures in hope that a restored Vingdnir in painting might turn into reality. I'm leaving that in, fuck off. Only, the princess couldn't, because she forgot which colors to use, as it had been so long since she had last set her eyes upon greenery. In my humble opinion, that's a stupid fucking excuse, once again displaying the complete and utter ineptness with which the nation handled its destruction. Anyways, the princess also tried to revive the tree via grafting. It didn't work. All she accomplished was being grafted herself. In that, she fucking froze to death and became a part of the fucking dead soil. Great job. And now, last person, Ukko, the scribe, who buried the princess, recorded everything, as scribes do, cursed the heavens, and turned into a lava jewel that can still be fought and subsequently one-shot to this day. Funnily enough, when looking up Frostarm lava jewel on the wiki, the overwhelming majority of comments are pissed off about how awful these guys are to fight, some even resorting to what I can only assume are literal offensive slurs, and while at first glance I found them quite amusing, I quickly rediscovered the repressed memories fighting them in the Blizzard Strider main over and over and over and over again on my second account, on which I only had an Ayaka team leveled. Anyways, we're luckily done with the Vingdnir, at least for now. For quite a long time, there didn't seem to be a whole lot going on, just a few ancient monuments like the Sommernacht Garden or the Cecilia Garden, until one day the Karabian, a storm god, established Mondstadt. It is unknown whether he established it after ascending to godhood or if he became one as a result of him becoming the de facto king of the area now known as Storm Terror's Lair. Also, around the same time, Andreas gained his powers from an ancient god, allowing him to ascend to the same status himself. Something to note here is that at the time he was still an actual wolf and might have looked vastly different to how he does now, though that's something I'll get to shortly. Back to the Karabian, there was one challenge to him establishing his Grand Kingdom, the fact that Mondstadt back then was named pretty accurately in that it was as vacant and inhospitable as the actual fucking moon, as there were still blizzards and snowstorms prohibiting the very act of daring to draw a breath. Interestingly enough, this time Andreas was explicitly named as the cause for these unfortunate circumstances, even though there is clearly already a precedent of Mondstadt being a desolate hellscape, which poses a question. However, that question will go completely unanswered, so I might as well move on. On to how the Karabian managed to build a city. Everyone uses them, everyone loves them. Walls! Now, you have to know there's two types of walls, starting with the first one. The I am scared and I must hide wall, used by, for example, the ancient Chinese to circumvent the common issue of being ransacked, scalped, and burned alive by the Mongols. And exactly this type of wall was masterfully employed by the Karabian to ward off the blizzards, and with him being the god of storms, there wasn't even any manual labor required, he just put up a big wall of wind. You now might be wondering about the second type of wall. Well, it's the wall for the good of the people. Popular examples mostly include economic powerhouse democracies such as Eastern Germany and, more recently, the great state of North Korea. Why do the same people always win the elections? Because they're that cool. The walls are simply there for the citizenry's safety. Surely entrapping your entire population within walls to launch you at high velocities upon contact is going to be of no concern throughout Mondstadt's history. Andreas declares war on the Karabian, completely fucking fails, and dies of cringe, turning into a ghost wolf. Wow. In the meantime, there is no evidence of the Caribbean doing anything. Consequently, the people began distrusting the Caribbean for being too aloof, and the entire Gunhilder clan just fucked off into the snow. Who could have seen that coming? Obviously, the Gunhilder clan would have had minuscule chances of survival, however, a tiny wind spirit as well as Istaroth, the god of time, came to their rescue. Because of this, the Gunhilders started revering both of them, leading especially the previously powerless wind spirit to gain in strength. Around the same time, that same wind spirit befriended a bard, and shortly after, a rebellion ensued led by the aforementioned bard and wind spirit, as well as Amos, the Caribbean's lover, the Gunhilder clan, and the red-haired warrior, a likely ancestor to the Ragenwinder clan. As is widely known, the rebellion ended in success. The Caribbean was overthrown. However, both Amos and the bard died. Now, remember Andreas? Well, he basically died due to his own incompetence in trying to overthrow the Caribbean. Yes, but in his ethereal form, he did maintain his ambition to rule for a time. However, at some point, he recognized that he was entirely unfit to be a god ruling over humans, and so gave up on ascending to Celestia, leaving the tiny wind spirit as the only contender. And so, he assumed the appearance of his deceased bard friend and ascended to godhood as the Anemo Archon. Barbados. Using his newly acquired powers, he basically terraformed Mondstadt, actually making it habitable. Also, he relocated Mondstadt to Cider Lake. I want to make a quick note here. Mondstadt translates to Moon City, right? That's not too mind-blowing. Only it's the only instance in the game so far of both the region and its respective capital being referred to by the same name. So from now on, I'll be calling the actual city Mondstadt and the general area the Mondstadt region. Good, we've got that out of the way. Another thing I want to make clear here is that as of right now, there is actually not a whole lot known about the Archon War era of Mondstadt, which will without a doubt be elaborated on with future updates centered around the Dandelion Sea, etc. Okay, now we've reached what is the post-Archon War era, but before I fully move on to that, I do want to stop a moment at Ishtaroth, the god of time I mentioned a few paragraphs earlier. As you might have guessed from the footage, she was at some point revered in the Mondstadt region, but finally she faded from history over time, the reasons for which, at least the ones specific to Mondstadt, I'll get into in a bit. And yes, that means she was actually not exclusively worshipped in the Mondstadt region, rather she was one of the four shades of the primordial one and thus worshipped in Enkalmomia eons before even the first settlers set foot on Vindagnyr. All that to say, given the lack of evidence that proves the contradictory, I think this huge discrepancy in whether Ishtaroth was revered hints at one of two things. Either that the memory of her specifically in other areas has faded to such an extent that there is not even a single hint of her left, or alternatively that other areas, over the course of the fight against the Second Cave and the war's aftermath, went on to align with and pray to one of the other three shades of the primordial one. All of this is entirely speculation and entirely incomprehensible to the majority of people, including myself. So, moving on, why was Ishtaroth forgotten? Well, for one, with the establishment of the 7 Archons, it's easy to assume that other deities faded out of relevance, and more importantly, I honestly forgot where I was going with this, so let's all pretend we forgot about her too. After Barbados' ascension to the throne, for a while there wasn't a whole lot going on, except Dvalin's birth. That's important, even though as an elemental dragon he's at odds with Celestia and the Archons, he befriended Barbados and became the Dragon of the East, the first of the later 4 winds. Sometime later, however, Barbados made a decision that would heavily affect the next 1,000 or so years. Nothing. Now that Barbados had departed, presumably to get shit-faced in the mountains or whatever, several clans arose to assume the positions of rulers, the most powerful and influential being the Gunhilders, the Imolaukers, hey, look at that, they did job again, and of course the Lawrences, and if you paid any attention during Eula's story quest, you'll know exactly just how well they did to keep the peasants obedient. Putting the questionable legitimacy of especially the Lawrence clan and its justification by the church, wow, that has never once happened, aside, this time frame is also where the game's official manga takes off, so if you're interested, I'd highly recommend you go read it, or at least parts of it. It's literally free on the website, so why not? So, now that you've completely and utterly disregarded my advice, let's proceed. At some point, Ursula the Drake, a well, Drake, started attacking Mondstadt, which is entirely irrelevant for now, but will come to play a more significant role shortly. Also, the Gunhilders, somewhat unsurprisingly, refused to bow down to the Lawrences and other unknown clans. However, they just fucked off into the woods because they weren't influential enough, so Mondstadt's savior would be one of their own. Maratha's children were nomadic people mostly concerned with survival through combat. Consequently, there's next to no recorded history and it's questionable whether they even had a script or not. There was, however, a folk tale orally passed down through generations, that the gods in Celestia would, upon death, allow the most accomplished of champions to ascend to the floating castle upon which the enigmatic deities were perched. This tale was, as customary, also told to a young Vanessa. While she was still young, the Drake, hey, there's this fat fuck again, pursued her tribe for 4 days straight, driving them to the brink of extinction. In desperate need of a shelter, they arrived at a fortified city built sturdily upon a rock formation and surrounded by a lake. Surely they had found salvation. Nah, they were immediately taken prisoners and, due to their general combat prowess, forced to fight in the arena of the nobles. Vanessa, as would become apparent, was especially adept, and thus her enslaver made a deal with her. By conquering 12 opponents in the arena, she and her people would be granted freedom. And indeed, she went on to vanquish 11 of the 12 foes with ease, even dispatching of the gladiator called the Champion before her, earning her the nickname Lion Fang Knight. Fun fact, the deathmatch is that guy's weapon. The 12th fight fast approached when Vanessa, through a coincidence, became friends with Venti. He offered to free her and her tribe, however, she insisted on fighting for their freedom. And so the day of her final fight had come. The hand of the Lawrence clan had somehow made a deal with Ursa the Drake, which had him sacrifice the entire tribe of Maratha's children to this fat fuck, and in turn Ursa would leave Mondstadt alone. Lawrence was in fact so confident in his plan that he vowed to hand over the keys of both his property and the entirety of Mondstadt should Vanessa emerge victorious. Vanessa engaged in combat and with Venti's help managed to pretty effortlessly drive this fat fuck away. Well, unfortunately for the deprived aristocracy, and fortunately for everyone else, a rebellion ensued again, with the Wanderer's troop, aristocracy traitors, and finally the Gunhilder clan aiding in the abolishment of the Lawrence clan and its followers. Also, a contract between the aristocracy and Morax was discovered stating that each and every soldier from Mondstadt was to be sold into slavery, naturally leading the army to revolt and refuse orders. What was only discovered centuries later was that this contract had been, in fact, a forgery made by Barbados himself. After the corrupt aristocrat clans were exiled, Vanessa led the efforts to restore the city, becoming the first Grandmaster as well as the Dandelion Knight. Quick etymology lesson here: in German as well as many other primarily Latin languages, and to an extent in English as well, dandelion not only refers to the flower but also often translates to something like lion's tooth in German, Löwenzahn. So actually Vanessa's transformation from the Lion Fang Knight to the Dandelion Knight is quite poetic, and while the dandelion's connection to the tooth of a lion is somewhat lost in the English version, this very clear distinction between an actual lion's tooth and a flower is something the German translation, for example, solely misses, as she is called the Löwenzahnritter both prior to and after the abolishment of the aristocracy. Anyways, Vanessa established the Favonius Knights. Don't want to get into yet another etymology tangent, so I'm gonna leave this here, and honestly I might do a video on a bunch of names and shit. Let me know if you're interested. At some point, she, as the only known mortal, ascended to Celestia, at where the massive tree grows at Windrise, transforming into a falcon, which I'll get to shortly. Also, the Mondstadt Library was established, eventually becoming the largest library in northern Tevat. And of course, finally, the Four Winds were formally assembled, Enris being the Wolf of the North, Dvalin the Dragon of the East, and Vanessa both the Lion of the South and the Falcon of the West. Now, there is some contradictory info on her being the Falcon, or more accurately, Eagle of the West, as in the manga she ascended and subsequently transformed pretty much right after freeing her tribe, whereas most other sources either had her ascend after death or, in my opinion, most likely, ascend and transform into the Falcon of the West, but then return to Tevat in human form until her eventual death. However, However, the case with Vanessa's and the aristocracy's chapter at a close Mondstadt was, in principle, pretty much the same as it is today. All the holidays and festivals, the felonious nights, and church governing the city, led by a Grand Master, the four winds protecting the city. However, this all took place 8,000 years ago, and as such, there's still one major event to occur. Now, before we start getting into the sauce, I do have to obligatorily introduce you to Rosalind Lore, and in face of the danger of spiraling into yet another etymology lesson, I will promptly move on. On to these fuckers, who, in an unfortunate string of events, invaded Tevat. Again, as with so many other things, I do intend on doing a separate video on either the Cataclysm or simply Kandria. For now, I'll just focus on events directly relevant to Mondstadt and its immediate surroundings. One of them is Durin. Created by Reindotter, I don't fucking know, an alchemist presumably from Kandria, it to display its beauty laid waste to especially Mondstadt, prompting both Dvalin and Venti to engage in combat with the artificial life form. They managed to subdue it in the Vindagir area, hence its modern name, Dragonspine. In the fight, however, Dvalin somehow managed to ingest some of Durin's blood, causing him to go into a century-long slumber, eventually leading to the Arkham Quest's events. As for Durin and, subsequently its corpse, it fulfilled the princess's prophecy from eons past, and its blood revitalized the once sacred tree, causing it to become the frost-bearing tree we interact with to get, 50,000 Mora. Ooh! Post at me here, I finished the most recent event and, Durin is in there, I guess. But considering there were no real relevant lore revelations, not to mention any possible information would be relayed to us by a fucking papier-mâché dragon turned chibi mini-dragon the height of Ziox, true, I think we can disregard his appearance in this event entirely. Except if I missed something, but honestly, I don't care. Me from 4 months ago recording the script, you may continue. Unless you've got late-stage dementia or Alzheimer's, you'll probably remember Reindotter. And while some of you will not give the slightest of shits, I will talk about that name's etymology and why it's really fucking cool in hopes that some of you might get around to my planned video centering on, Genshin etymology. Reindotter can be translated to, Reindotter in a whole bunch of Norse languages, referencing Der Ring des Nibelungen. It's a roughly 150-year-old German musical drama, and basically in this piece a dwarf called Alberich steals gold from the Rhine Maidens and uses it to forge a ring. Capable of ruling the world, the gods try to reclaim the ring, and in the end, everyone dies. And while I think there isn't enough evidence to suggest Kaya's and Reindotter's names were chosen strictly based on what role they will end up playing or have played, I wouldn't be surprised if future characters would end up getting named after other characters from Der Ring des Nibelungen. Actually, backtrack that, I just realized the ancient Giga Dragon's name was Nibelung. Now let's get back to the Cataclysm and back to the previously introduced Rosalind Lurefalter, who, upon finding out her lover died in the Cataclysm, set herself ablaze and almost fucking died, as is expected and rational, only to be saved by Piero of the Fatui and granted a cryo delusion. Wow, Senora, what an attractive character with massive personalities. I hope she'll be playable. Okay, now that all took place about 500 years ago, so naturally the next line of important events played out within the same decade we started the game in. And so most of it is detailed in guess where? The manga. Woo! So in light of the fact that you can just go and read for yourself, I'll just quickly breeze over relevant events, among which is included Diluc's PTSD lore. Basically, 4 years ago, Diluc and his father Krepus were on their way to the Dawn Winery when the Fatui set an ambush, which involved attaching a metal bug to their cart. This metal bug somehow compelled a monster to descend from the skies. Ursa the what the actual fuck? That thing's been roaming around Mondstadt for the past, 1,000 years and no one's ever bothered to do something about it? That is, quite frankly, ridiculous. So ridiculous, in fact, that Krepus, distracted by the absolute state of Mondstadtian law enforcement, drove the carriage over a small pebble, resulting in him tumbling from his seat and plunging onto the hardened earth, leading him to, due to the unfortunate angle of impact, shatter the entirety of his cervical vertebrae, killing him instantly. The last two sentences were, unsurprisingly, entirely made up, but to ensure I can't be held accountable for genuine mistakes and factual errors unavoidably present in this MP4 some might consider calling a video for entertainment's sake, I will purposefully spread misinformation on the internet, resulting in any and every point of criticism to be defendable by stating that it's not that serious, bro. No, it isn't. And the notion that the spreading of misinformation could or will eventually leave people in doubt whether to trust sources and facts and instead resort to surrounding themselves with voices only reaffirming their prejudices, not knowing those voices have nothing but their own agenda in mind? Yeah, that is, in fact, entirely made up. And so, you will not bat an eye when I tell you that Ursa the Drag was driven away by the prospect of having to engage in BDSM roleplay without previously ensuring a no homo was audibly expressed by all parties involved. Anyways, following Krabs' death, to keep their reputation, the Favodius Knights covered the incident up, leading Diluc to resign from the Knights and from there on out, LARP as Batman. Moving on, a couple of years later, it turns out Ursa the Drag was finally defeated. Did the Pav Knights get their act together after 1000 years and finally slay the massive threat to Mondstadt's general safety? No, they didn't. Instead, it was slain by the second Fatui Harbinger, Il Dottore, who appears in the manga's first chapter looking goofy as all hell. With him also arrived a disheveled, almost corpse-like girl wrapped in bandages whose identity, well known and also kinda obvious, I will not state in an attempt to get you to read the manga yourself, as I am tired of writing the script and the manga contains pretty much the final bit of Mondstadt lore. So then, this is it, the accurate history of Mondstadt. Why did it take me 7 months to make this shitty video? Well, it didn't. I worked on a Farida review, a Calming review, a Navia video, and a video ranking claymores for whatever reason, only to scrap all of them. Thank God. But worry not, such a thing will probably never happen again, as I am currently working on the liyue lore video already, which will without doubt be significantly longer and hopefully less atrocious in quality compared to this video. So you might subscribe to remember me when I get this out, time for the release of 6.0. See you then, maybe, I don't know.